Solution video for case problem 2, tutorial 5. We need to download the player's workbook, and the first instruction asks us to fill out the documentation sheet with your name and the date. I have added a sheet with our solution pictures, so we'll come back here and refer to these several times, make sure we're on the right track. And then of course there's this player's sheet. The third instruction wants us to make a table out of this. There's two ways to make a table. One is to jump straight into format as table. When you choose one of these formats, it'll automatically convert it to a table. The second way is to go to the insert ribbon, and right here is insert table, in which case it will format it to a default format. So either way, we'll get the job done. I'll go to this one and I'll choose that one right there. It's going to select all of your data as long as you had a single cell selected before we did that step of choosing format table. My table has headers. Yep, I have column headings right here at the top. And so as long as you have no blank rows or columns in your data, then everything should be okay. So I'm going to hit OK. That formatted in that red color. If I change my mind, I can click on any one of these to make it something different. So maybe I'll go ahead and make it blue. I think our solution pictures are mostly blue. Not that I care too much about the color. So moving on, we're going to make a copy of this worksheet. So you can click on the player's sheet and see the little symbol down there towards the bottom where my mouse is. If I hold down the control key, it adds a plus sign. That tells me I'm making a copy, and then when I let go, I still have my original and I have the new one. So we're going to right click and rename that sort position. So now it asks us to sort this in ascending order by position, then descending order by salary. So in order to sort on two different columns, we'll have to run to the data ribbon, and here's a sort dialog box because we want to do a dual level sort. First by position, and I believe that was ascending, so starting alphabetically A to Z. Then we're going to add a level to sort by salary, and that was descending, meaning the largest at the top, and then we'll descend to the smallest values. So right here we'll go largest to smallest. So we hit OK, and now we have our largest values for the center position. And then down here you go into your power forward and their salaries. So we've done the sort, and now we move on to step 5, where they want us to apply a conditional formatting to the salary, a yellow color to everybody who has a salary greater than 10,000. So I'll select the first cell, hit the Shift END down arrow. So the END key and the down arrow selects all the data. Now I can go to the home ribbon, conditional formatting, and we want all the cells that are greater than 10 million. So I'll just type 10 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros, and you have some predefined formats. So one of them is yellow. So I'll hit OK on that. And we can run over to our solution picture to make sure to hit it sort position. Yeah, we're looking similar to that with the 19 million at the top. Same yellow pattern. Oh, I did skip a step. And that was we needed to do the accounting format on this. So I will select all of that. I can run over here. We can do accounting, but it wanted 0 decimals. If you hit it here, it changes it to a custom format. Not that that's that big a deal. But I can also run over here, go accounting, and change it to 0 right there. And then, of course, it calls an accounting format. Now we look probably more like our solution picture with the dollar signs on there. So the next instruction, I think we're on step 6. We're going to make a copy of the player's sheet again. So I'll click on the players, drag it, and now when I hold down the control key, I get my plus sign. So I can let go, and now we're going to rename this guy Filter Team. Okay, so we want to insert a slicer. Well, because we have a table with this thing called an Excel table, I can go to the design ribbon, and there's a slicer tool. So you turn that on, and it asks, well, what do we want to slice by? And it's going to be by team. So I can hit OK, and this is what it looks like. I can move it. I can shrink it up a bit. It has its own ribbon, slicer tools with the options, and I can change its style. Right now, all the teams are visible. I think on instruction 7, they want us to do New York Knicks and Miami Heat. So I click on the Knicks, and then I can hold down the control key to get the Miami Heat. Otherwise, if you don't hold down the control key, you can only select one team at a time. So by holding down the control, you can also do the shift key and grab more than one. Anyway, so the heat, control key, the Knicks, I think we're good there. And now on instruction 8, they said we only want to see people who have a 5 million salary. So right here, there's a filter arrow on the salary column. So I can select that. Number filters greater than. So I'll run over here, and it's greater than 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 5 million. And we'll take a look at our solution picture. There's a sort position, and now we filtered by team, and I think we look similar. The one thing I realized, I made this the accounting format, and I think it was supposed to be the original table. Should have been the accounting format. So I'll hurry up and fix that for our next problems. We'll go accounting and 0, hit OK. So now we have dollar signs on everything. So I guess if I'm going to be accurate, I should hurry up and do it here too. Okay, on to instruction 9, where we do the same thing. We'll take the player's worksheet, which we finally got the salary formatted, and we'll click drag, hold down the control key. I get my plus symbol. So right click, and we'll rename that guy to filter top 15%. So they wanted top 15% by salary. So again, same area, I have that filter arrow. Here's our number filters, and even though this says top 10, there's going to be settings in here that allow us to change it to 15. So you click on that, and we have a top or bottom selection here. We're going to do top, and I can change the number to 15. And finally, do we want 15 items, 15 distinct things, the 15 top salaries, or 15%? So I can change that to percent and hit OK. Then it says sort the data by salary in descending order. So right here's our filter. You can tell it's filtered because of the little funnel. I can also click on that and sort, smallest to largest. It says in descending order, so that would be largest to smallest. So I filtered or sorted it with that. I could have run to the data ribbon, filtered right here, or I keep saying filter, sorting right here, and then on the home ribbon there's another place where you can sort over here. Anyway, we got the job done. Moving on to instruction 10, it asks us to include a total row. So again, because this is an Excel table, we have our own ribbon. Click on design, and one of the selections is total row. And what that does is put a total row at the bottom of your data. And then every time you click in any cell down here, you have a drop down arrow that gives you a choice of doing things to that column. So in this case, they want us to take an average of the salary. And that is going to change based on our filter. So if we were to filter this in a different way, we would have a different number here. Over here it says total. Well, I can type over that and change it to the word average. And then the instruction asks us to count the number of teams. So I can go here and switch to the word count. And they want us to remove this one to make that select none. Something I want to point out is even though we took an average of the salary, if you look at this formula, it doesn't say average, it says subtotal. And so that function is basically taking an average of the visible cells, and this 101 represents average. And then we're doing the square brackets salary column. If I run over to this cell, notice it's 103, which is the count function. And so basically they have a different numbering scheme for all the different sum, average, max, min, count. And so this is 103 for the team column. So moving on to instruction 11, we're going to make another copy of the player's sheet. So I click on it, I can start moving it, hold down the control key, I'll drag it over here, and now we're going to rename that to subtotals. Now it says we want to make a subtotal of the salary by team. So for each team, we'll subtotal the salary. Now here's the problem with subtotals is if you run over to the data group or data ribbon and outline group, that subtotals right here is grayed out. You can't do a subtotal on a table. We need to convert it back to an Excel range. So we can right click and under table, here's convert to range. Or on the design ribbon, you have a button to convert to range. So we'll convert it to a normal range. Now notice when I click on it, I've lost my table ribbon up here, but when I go to data, subtotals available. So the first thing we need to do is on a subtotal is to sort by team. So I'll click on the team column or just a cell in that column and go A to Z. I'm sorted by team, and now we'll subtotal. And what we're going to do is at each change in, and right here we'll make this team. So every time the value in this column changes, we then want to sum, and we want to sum not the division but the salary. So the rest of these we'll leave alone. We'll hit OK, and notice every time I switch teams from Chicago to LA Lakers, it put in a subtotal. LA Lakers to Miami Heat, it put in a subtotal. Heat to Knicks, subtotal, right? That's what those words mean on that subtotal. And then also notice it gives us this outline box over here, or boxes. I can click on 2, which will then shrink up all of our subtotals to just show the team totals. If we run over to our solution picture, oops, and maybe at the very bottom. There we'll see the subtotals by team, although we don't see the little outline indicators, but looks very similar. So that's how you do a subtotal. Moving on to instruction 12. We go back to the player's sheet, but we don't need to make a copy this time. Now we're going to create a pivot table out of this. We want to create a pivot table showing salaries by team and position. It mentions placing in the position field in the columns. And then we're going to rename the worksheet as a pivot table team position. Format the salaries with the accounting format, no decimal places. So here we go. I'm over on the player's sheet. Under insert is where we can create a pivot table. So we'll go ahead and grab pivot table. And it's going to say, well, do you want this selected table arranged? Which just brings up a problem I forgot way back on instruction 3. When we created this table, we were supposed to name it. So just to show you that point, under the design ribbon, table name, right here is where you name your tables. So we're going to call this table NBA players. So that was, I think, was instruction 3 or 4. I guess I forgot to do that. So back to instruction 12, insert pivot table, NBA players. We're going to put it on a new worksheet. And so you just hit OK. And so now we have a pivot table fields over here, and it's going to put it in this area here. So it mentions it wants position in the column. So I'll put the positions down here. And the original pivot table is to have salaries by team and by position. So we'll go ahead and put the team in the rows. So I can click on team, and it puts it in rows down here. And then finally the salary is what we'll put into the value field. Now it mentions changing the salary to accounting format. So over on the right in this pivot table fields, there's a drop down arrow, value field settings, and it's right here where I can format the sum of salary. So I'll hit number format, accounting was 0, and it will format all of these values to accounting. I could have also hit this button, and again number format, it would have done the same thing. So right here under field settings, or with this drop down arrow, there's field settings. We need to rename this sheet, so I'll right click, rename to pivot table team position. And we'll run over to the solution, and I think these tend to be towards the top. And I think we're looking similar. So we have our positions, our teams, and our totals with the salaries in the middle. And we're on to instruction 13, which is about creating a slicer for our pivot table. So when I click on the pivot table, I should have a choice for creating a slicer for that. There we go. So I clicked on the pivot table, I get a new ribbon, pivot table tools. And under analyze, just like we could do with tables, we can also insert a slicer for a pivot table. And again, we're going to do it based on team. So I can do a team slicer. I'll move it to the right here. Again, I can change the format. It mentions matching the style of what's already here. Whoops, and now that I read the instructions more closely, I realize it's not about team, it's about division, so no big deal. Back to analyze. Whoop. Where's the design? insert slicer, and it was division. Hit OK. I'll move it up. And then finally, we want to see people from Atlantic, Central, and Southeast. So Atlantic, Central. Again, I'm going to have to use the Control key, Central and Southeast. So having held down the Control key, I have those 3 divisions, and now it's only showing the teams that belong to one of those 3 divisions. I can resize my slicer. I can do it by just clicking and dragging, something like that. There are size options or formatting options of the size of your slicer and the buttons. Again, it has its own ribbon, Slicer Tools, with all these different options of how to format it. Finally, instruction 14, we're going to make another pivot table. Click on Players. So I will go Insert Pivot Table. Again, it's going to say, well, here's your table arrange, NBA players. We're going to create a new worksheet, so I'll hit OK. This time we want to calculate the number and average salaries by position. So the first thing I'm going to do is put position down on the rows, and we will calculate the average salary. So when I click on salaries, it starts out with the sum of salary, but this time we want the average. So it's in the same spot. I can do field settings where before we were messing with the number format. Right here we can change it from sum of salary to average, and as long as we're in here, I'm going to assume they want that accounting, so I'll hurry up and fix that. And so now we have the average salary, but now we want to know the count of people in that position. So one way to do the count of anything is if I go back to the players sheet, I have several columns here that have text in them. Anytime you grab one of those columns and put it under the values part of a pivot table, the only thing Excel knows how to do is count because it's text, right? It can't take an average of text. It can't sum it, max, min. So if I were to just take any one of those, like the team column, drag it down here to values, it's going to do a count of team. And to be honest with you, I could have grabbed any one of these columns as long as there's no blank cells in any of the data, and I would have got the same results. It's just going to do a count. Now, of course, I don't want to say count of team because that doesn't mean anything. So if I just change, I can click on these and change that word to number. And right here, we wanted to shorten this to average salary. We want to rename the worksheet, right click, rename, pivot table. And we can resize some of the columns. I think it's looking okay. Anyway, so now let's run over to the solution picture for this guy. And I think we're looking very similar. And it looks good, other than I think they had a different style is why they ended up with probably a little darker style or something. Yeah, and they end up with the double border on the grand total. Anyway, I think that's it for this exercise. You end up with quite a few sheets when you're done, but we got it all done.